Hello again, my dear students, and welcome back to our graphic design class. For this lesson, we will be creating a flyer design using Adobe Illustrator. But before we go to the actual work of designing a flyer, I will be talking first about raster and vector image and the works every time layout. Here are our learning objectives. So at the end of this video lesson, you are expected to differentiate raster and vector image. You should be able to identify the advantages as well as the disadvantages of using raster and vector image. You will apply the concept of the so-called works every time layout in creating a flyer design. And of course, you will be using a creative software like Adobe Illustrator in creating your own flyer design. Our first lesson entails looking at the different types of images. In design, we refer to two groups of images. So we have raster and vector. Seeing the graphics or the image in our screen now, we can already differentiate what is a vector and what is a raster. Okay, so for you to understand further their differences, let's start discussing these two groups of images in detail. I would like to start with the raster image first. This is the type of image most of you would be familiar with. Raster is a pixel-based image. To fully understand what a raster image is, we need to start at the smallest possible particle that builds up a raster image. I'm sure you have heard of the term pixel before. A pixel is a unit of measurement used in graphic design. Pixel is short for picture element, and pixel is a single square of color that represents the smallest part of an image. A pixel is roughly 1/96th of an inch or 0.26 millimeters and is always a square, like this. Okay? So parang ganito yung itsura ng pixel. When you enlarge a raster image, and this is a raster image, okay, when you enlarge a raster image, you can see tiny squares consisting a single color, and those are called pixels. Thus, we can say that a raster image, which is also known as a bitmap, is an image made up of thousands and even millions of pixels that are joined or combined to form a whole, almost like a puzzle in its pieces. Photographs and most images you find on the internet are raster image, like the one you are seeing in our screen. If you increase the size of a raster image, you will lose quality as you cannot add pixels that do not exist. We call this process pixelation. Pag nagiging blur or blurred yung picture nyo, pag na-enlarge, ang tawag natin doon pixelation. Please be very careful as pixelation is one of the first methods for a person to identify if you are a designer or a non-designer, which means if your photo or your photographs or your images are pixelated, then you are identified as a non-designer. Kasi kung designer ka, alam mo dapat yon. Okay? So raster of or bitmap images usually end with JPEG or JPG, JPEG, PNG, BMP or bitmap, or GIF. Okay, so .jpg, .png, .bmp, and .gif are actually the file extensions of a raster image. So kung meron kayong nakitang picture or photo and the file extension, say for example, rose.jpg or rose.png or rose.bmp, or if it is animated, if it is an animated image, ang ginagamit nila usually is .gif. If the file extension is that or the file type or file format ay gumagamit ng apat na yan, then they are identified or classified as raster image. To determine the amount of pixels in the image consists of You simply multiply the pixel width by the height of an image. When you are using a Mac computer, you can simply right-click on the image, go to Get Info, and under More Info, you will notice a Dimensions option. If you want to access how many megapixels does an image have, you need to, and you are using a Windows computer, simply right-click on the photo as well, select Properties, and this window will appear. In this window, you click on Details, and under Image tab, so this is the Image tab, you will find the pixels dimension. So the pixels dimension is 5184 by 3456, where 5184 is the width and 3456 is the height. For argument's sake, let's say your image is 5184 pixels wide by 3456 pixels high. By simply multiplying the width and the height, you will get the megapixel count. In this case, our image is 17,915,904, which is equivalent to 17.9 megapixels. Okay, so that's how you compute for the megapixels, kung ilan ang megapixel count ng isang image, ng isang raster image, you simply multiply its width and its height. A vector, on the other hand, is an image created from mathematically defined geometric forms like lines, fields, and shapes. So when you combine a line to a shape, any shape, then you will create a vector image. They can be enlarged to any size without losing quality. So that's one of the advantages of vector image. A good example of a vector image is any logo. So let's take Fred's logo, for example. If we zoom in on the crown, we will see that it retains its quality. Walang nangyayaring pixelation. A vector image extension ends with AI, which stands for Adobe Illustrator if you use this software. We have also an EPS file, which is encapsulated postscript. And we also have a CDR file, which is a CorelDRAW file. Vector images can easily be converted to raster images. So when you export a vector image using a vector editing software like Illustrator or CorelDRAW, and you export that using the .jpg, .png, .bmp, or .gif format, then you are creating or you are converting that vector image into a raster image. Kindly note that if you do not own a vector editing software, you will most likely not be able to open these files since vector images are mostly used by designers and special software required to access these files. Okay? So if you have a vector image and the file formats are the following, AI, EPS, and CDR, you cannot open this using Picasa or Photo Image Viewer. Okay, you can only open this using the vector image software or special software like Adobe Illustrator, CorelDRAW. Ayun lang. Okay, so yun yung alam kong very common and very popular vector vector editing software. Both raster and vector images have their own advantages and disadvantages. They are also used for different reasons. A raster or bitmap image is normally a photograph or can even be a rasterized vector image. When we say rasterized vector image, when you export a vector image, you export that and change its file type to .jpg or .png, then you are creating a rasterized vector image. In short, you are converting that vector image into a raster image. Kaya tinawag siyang rasterized vector image. Raster images are normally edited and created in Photoshop. A vector, on the other hand, is normally in the form of a logo or any illustration created in Adobe Illustrator or CorelDRAW. So this was mentioned earlier. Note that we can add raster images to our vector artwork, but also take note that even we add the raster image to our vector artwork, that image will still remain as a raster image. To make things more clear, I would like to explain each advantages and disadvantages. The more you work with this image, the better you will understand them and their uses. An advantage of a raster image is that it consists of continuous tones and thus easy to blend colors. Think about photographs, which consist of an array of colors blended together. Raster images are also relatively easy to produce. You just get your cell phone or your DSLR camera and take a picture and run. You have a raster image. On the other hand, disadvantages are larger raster images are suitable for printing, but since the image is bigger in file size, it takes up a lot of space. These images are known as high-resolution images. So if your image megapixel count is too high, then that is a high-resolution images. And that is more suitable for printings. Kasi kahit is enlarge mo siya, the same ang quality. Small raster images are small in file size and do not take up as much space. But due to this, they are also low in quality. And these low-resolution images are mostly used for web, email, or digital devices such as your cell phone, tablet, iPad, or laptops. These images are known as low-resolution images. Low-resolution images have less or lesser megapixel count kasi smaller sila. Raster images cannot be enlarged because this will result in loss of quality. Nagpipixelate siya. Because simply put, tulad ng sinabi ko kanina, you cannot add a pixel that do not exist. Kasi kung ang image mo 11.6 megapixels, that's 11,600,000 na count ng pixels. Okay? And kung 11,600,000 ang count niya, kung i-enlarge mo yan, hindi naman nagdadagdag yan ng pixel at nagiging 11,700,000. Hindi nagiging ganon. The same pa rin yung megapixel count niya. So, ang possibility or ang nangyayari, nagbe-blurred siya. Okay? And last, disadvantage, raster images cannot easily be converted to vector. Okay? Ang vector, mabilis lang i-convert yan para maging raster. Export mo lang yan. Pero ang raster, mahirap i-convert to vector. Mahaba yung proseso. Okay? So those are the advantages and disadvantages of raster images. Vector images, on the other hand, also has its advantages and disadvantages. Referring to their advantages, vector images are small in file size, irrespective of the physical size of the artwork. So kahit sobrang laki ng artwork mo sa screen or sobrang liit ng artwork mo sa screen, the same file size. So hindi siya masyadong matakaw sa space. Okay? So vector images can be scaled infinitely without losing quality or without pixelation. So ang vector image tulad ng pinakita ko kanina yung Fred's logo, kahit enlarge mo yun ng sobrang laki, the same quality pa rin. So hindi siya nagpipixelate and the same file size. Okay? So vector images are also quick and easy to convert to a raster image. So nasabi ko kanina, you simply export it or save it using the JPEG, bitmap, or GIF file extensions. Their disadvantages are that It is quite difficult to create continuous tone like you see on a photograph. It is not impossible, but it is quite a task to create the illusion of a continuous tone when creating a vector image. In other words, a vector image will not look like a photograph, but rather a digital drawing that simulates a photograph. Vectors are only accessible by making use of vector editing software, and thus you cannot work and edit a vector if you do not have access to a program like Illustrator or CorelDRAW. So if Illustrator or CorelDRAW are not installed in your computer, then you cannot open also vector images. If I can explain the last advantage, which is tedious to create, I would have to compare vector with a raster image. To take a photograph of a landscape, for example, di ba, you simply pick up your camera and take the picture, as easy as that. We are not considering your photography skills here, but rather the simple process of pressing the button of your camera. If you would like to create a landscape in vector format, okay, so yung naunang nabanggit ko na you use your camera and take a photo. After taking a photo, you save that photo into your computer, then you have a raster image. But if you would like to create a landscape in vector format, this will mean that you will need to digitally redraw this landscape like an artist. And this would obviously take a long time, obviously. It will not also look like a real landscape, but a digitally drawn version. So, ganun mag-create ng raster image, or hindi, ganun mag-create ng landscape using Adobe Illustrator or CorelDRAW. So, if you want a landscape vector image, then you need to draw that manually using a vector editing software. If you want a landscape raster image, you just take a photo of a landscape. Then tapos na. Okay? So those are the advantages and disadvantages of vector images. Let's play a game called Guess the Image. It's quite easy, and you simply need to guess whether the image I will show you is a raster or vector image. Let's take a look at image 1. Image 1 is a raster image. How do I know this? Since one of the advantages we mentioned of raster image, they consist of continuous tone. See the blending of colors on the powdered pane? Okay. An easy way to determine a raster image is by simply asking yourself whether this image looks like a photograph to you. And for me, this looks like a photograph. So, hindi lang yung blending of colors ang nagsasabi na raster siya, but obviously, this is a raster image, okay? So, if it does resemble a photograph, it must probably a raster image, okay? Simple as that. What does image 2 look like to you? If you guess vector, you are correct. The easiest way to tell this is a vector image is in fact that this image looks drawn. Obviously look drawn. Okay, so this is a vector image. The third image might be a bit tricky. What do you think this image is? You still not sure of your answer? Well, let me explain this to you. The image is a combination between a raster and vector image. If you look carefully, you can see the light bulb looks quite realistic, which is an indication that this was taken from a real photograph. The pencil, on the other hand, looks digitally drawn by simply looking at the shading and texture. You see? Considering the background, which entails a lot of detail, this is most probably a raster as well. So in short, image number 3 is a combination of a raster and vector image. What about this image of an orange teapot? If you guess raster, you are correct. The texture on the orange teapot, as we see here, is way too realistic to be a vector. So this is manipulated in Photoshop, maybe. Kaya naging ganyan siya. But obviously, this is an example of a raster image because it looks like a photograph to me and it's too realistic. By now, I think you're getting the hang of things. So the picture we are seeing now in the screen is a very realistic vector drawing. You can, however, see that it is not real by looking at the almost perfect shading and texture. It's almost perfect. It's just too perfect. Kindly note that with a lot of time, effort, dedication, and talent, some graphic artists are capable of creating extremely realistic looking vector images. So kayo, pag gumaling na kayo sa software na ginagamit nyo to create vector, you can also create such as like this, such like this. Okay, so parang totoo, pero kung titignan mo mabuti, hindi siya raster image. Okay, this is a vector image. In general, though, these are the key factors in identifying the difference between raster and vector image. And with a trained eye, you will be able to tell the difference. Okay, so very good for participating, although hindi ko kayo nakikita. Okay, so for you to better understand the difference between raster image and vector image, we will open a raster image. Okay, let's start with the vector image. So as you can see here, the file type of this is Adobe Illustrator Artwork, which means the file extension is .ai. So nabanggit natin sa ating previous topic na pag .ai siya, it is a vector format. Okay, we will open another one. And this is a PNG. Okay, let's try JPG. See, this is a JPG file. Okay. So, kung titignan natin, halos pareho ng itsura. Okay, pero kung i-check natin yung kanilang file extension or file type, this is a raster image because it uses .jpg or .jpeg. And this is a vector image because it uses the file extension .ai. Okay? So, nasabi natin kanina sa previous slides natin, when we use vector image, even we enlarge the size, okay, of a vector image does not lose its quality. So, ganun pa rin yung quality niya. So, hindi siya nagpipixelate. Yan ang advantage ng ating vector image. Pag raster image naman, when you enlarge a raster image, may pixelation na nangyayari. Okay? Since A4 lang kasi yung size na sinet natin dito, when we enlarge A4, nagpipixelate na siya. So, nakikita naman siguro natin dyan yung mga pixels. So, yung mga small squares na sinasabi natin. These are examples of pixels. And ito yung isang nangyayari pag gumamit ka ng raster image. So I hope that explains the difference between raster and vector image. Okay, so we can proceed to the next topic. Before the flyer design demo, I would like to share with you what I have learned from my online course. So I enrolled an online course for graphic design, and I would want to share with you this technique that will help you with almost any design, and this is called the works every time layout. It is called like this simply because it does really work every time. Okay, and I've tried it many times. It really works. Okay, so this is the works every time layout. Please listen carefully because this will be your guide or basis in creating your own flyer later on. The works every time layout can be divided into 6 steps. And these steps can be followed for almost any type of design. So why does it work every time? Simply because of the way we read and perceive things. So human beings are visual, and the fact that we read from left to right and top to bottom, this layout has been a great success. The 6 steps are: step 1, margin. So we see here the margin. Okay, so this is the margin, this is the margin, margin hanggang sa taas. So start your document by creating generous margins first. Pag sinabing generous, huwag tipirin ang margin. Huwag isagad, lalong-lalo na ang mga type nyo or mga text nyo, huwag nyong isasagad sa mga gilid. Okay? These margins will aid as a guide for all elements that should not be cut off. Looking at the example on the left, you will notice that the type is far away from the edge of the document para may assurance tayo na hindi siya makakat once it needs to be cut. Okay? Step 2 is column. Add columns. So here we have 2 columns and the amount of columns differ depending on the size of your layout. Because, bakit kaya kailangan natin mag-add ng columns? Pwede namang diretsyo na lang. Please take note that people, this is true, people tend to read shorter sentences more easily. So, nagiging shorter nga naman siya pag tinu-column mo siya kaysa dire-diretso na ganon. And it creates the illusion of reading less. Kung tutusin, madami yung text, pero parang titignan mo, kokonti lang. Kasi nga, ginawa mo siyang 2 columns kaysa yung pinadiretso mong ganyan. Isang column lang. Okay? So, columns are a great way to retain your viewers' attention. And please try to make your columns between 5 to 12 centimeters wide. Okay, so the width of the column should be 5 to 12 centimeters wide because this is the standard for most columns. Okay? So, gawin yung 2 columns. Step 3 is visual. Have a visual at the top of your layout. So, this is my visual. Visual is actually the pictures. Remember that we are visual beings. So, this is a great way to attract your audience. So, dapat ang gamitin mong visual, yung alam mong it will catch the attention of your reader. Kung printed copy man yan or of the audience kung for digital device yan. Okay, so the visual will be placed at the top. So, ulitin ko lang, margin should be generous. Next, gawin mong 2 columns, yung paragraph mo or yung body copy. This is your body copy. Okay, gawin mong 2 columns and visual should be placed at the top. Catching visual. Okay, the 4th step is headline. The headline refers to the topic of your document. So, flyer design business template is the topic of my document. It should be right under the visual. So, tama naman yung kanyang location. Kasi ang ilalagay dito will be the company logo. So, just after the visual, below the visual, will be your headline. It should be right under the visual and be bold and exciting, as this is the second element your viewers will see after the visual. So, since pinakamalaki sa page natin ng visual, ito yung unang mapapansin ng audience or ng viewer. After that, dapat ang next na mapapansin nila will be the heading or the headline and not the body copy. So, make sure that this is exciting and this is bold, eye-catching. Okay? The 5th step is body copy. This refers to the text that will fill your document. So, this is your body copy. Your body copy can be placed in the column guides or you created in step 2. Okay, so this is your body copy and I mentioned that earlier. Okay, last step is tags. A tag refers to the additional information like logo, contact details. Usually, we place this at the bottom of our document where your viewer will exit the page. So, this will be the last item or content of the page that your viewer should notice. Okay, so ang unang mono-notice dapat nila will be the visual and the headline, and they will read so from top to bottom, from left to right. Okay, then after that, mag-e-exit sila using your tags. Okay, so I hope you understand that. You understood. Kasi i-apply natin ito later on pag gagawa tayo ng flyer design sa Adobe Illustrator. We will look at examples where the works every time layout have been applied successfully. On the first example, you will clearly see we have generous margins. Okay, so we have margins here on each side of the document. Okay, so that is the first example. The text in this example is divided into two columns, which makes our reader as if they are reading shorter text compared pag isang column lang siya. Okay. Visual in this example is placed right at the top. And this is my visual. And it is placed at the top. So makikita nyo dito nag 2 column siya and then nag 3 column siya dito sa baba and the tags below. We have headline in this example that slightly overlaps our visual. So this is our headline. Okay. This is our headline. Corporate brochure. Okay, and it is placed here. The body copy in this example is placed in 2 columns we created in step 2, just like we created in step 2. And our last step is tag, and you will see the contact details at the bottom of this document and the website. Okay, so those are examples of layouts or works every time of layout, applying the works every time layout, and you will also apply this once you create your flyer design. Okay, so ulitin ko lang, the visual should be the largest size and it is placed at the top. Okay, followed by the headline, yun dapat ang next na manotice, followed by the body copy na na-divide into columns, and followed by the tags, which is placed at the bottom. Okay, so congratulations on completing this lesson. So please feel free to give your feedback and any suggestions for me to better improve my instructions. So if you have questions still regarding the lesson, please feel free to email me or contact me via Messenger. Thank you for staying with me. For our next lesson, we will have a demo on how to create a flyer design using Adobe Illustrator. Okay, so see you at the next video.